Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for being here. It's our 4th annual Beginning Again retreat. We help those who are adjusting to life after caregiving ends with workshops and supportive conversations. I'm going to kick off our morning with some exercises to help us gain a little perspective about what might just have happened in terms of the loss of a caree. So we're going to start off with doodling and writing. So just a little bit about me. I started helping family caregivers in 1990. I launched a small business to support them in 1995. I began helping my dad in 2004, and then my mom in 2015. My brother died unexpectedly in August of 2021. My mom died a year later on the same day, and then my dad just died in July. So you'll know this. So much happens during a caregiving experience that sometimes you think, what did I just witness, experience, see? What just happened? And for me, because there were 3 deaths that felt one right after another, I really started to feel afterwards, like, how do I release this? So I started thinking about doodling. I don't know if any of you have heard of Zentangling or have done Zentangling. Yeah, it is just a very simple doodling process. We actually used to do an art show of Zentangles. If anybody wants to show their doodle that they create afterwards, I'll tell you how you can do that. Okay, so I am not an artist. I'm not a doodler. And you'll see my doodle and think, okay, that's not something an artist would create, but it was just a process to help me understand what has happened and to create a visualization of their life after death. That was really helpful for me to understand in my mind what I could envision about where my brother and my parents are, because it's really hard to get stuck in, okay, but are they okay? Especially in a caregiving experience, we are so committed to making sure they're okay that we wonder, are they still okay? Now, our belief systems can tell us that they are okay, depending on what we believe, but I also think it's helpful to have a visualization. So I created a doodle based on the number 3. So it was 3 family members who had died. So you can see my 3 in the middle. And that's what you start with a Zentangle. You start with a letter or a number. And then you just draw out from there. You use squiggly lines, you use circles, you use shapes. Whatever comes out is what you create. And you're welcome to start now. So if you have pen and paper, if you have colored pencils, whatever you have, go ahead and start your doodle. And I want to mention, if you think, but what do I start with? You could start with the number that relates to a death date. So my mom and my brother died on August 9th. I could doodle starting with 9. You could doodle the month that the death happened. So if someone died in January, you could start with 1. You could doodle the number of family members who have died within the past few years. That was my 3. You could start with a letter, the first letter of your caree's first name. So my mom's name is Sally, so I could doodle with an S. And an S actually would be a really nice way to start doodling. My father's first name is Roger, so I could start doodling with an R. And when I started with a 3, I took the ends of each piece of the 3. Oh, Christine, your mom died on August 9th too. Okay. Thank you for letting me know that. When I was creating the doodle and starting with the 3, I used the 3 ends of the 3 to create. Now, I appreciate what I drew. Drew looks like ghosts, but I didn't mean it to look like ghosts. It's actually pillows of clouds. So I wanted them to be comfortable in heaven. So I believe they're in heaven. And I thought, oh, they're so comfortable. They have these comfy clouds that they're just like so happy to be on. And the heart is them. So I believe their energy now is love. So I wanted to have 3 pillows of comfort with 3 hearts. Oh, I just felt so good doodling that. And then from there, I thought, well, their energy is love. So then I just swiggled out this energy that represents love and then put the hearts on. And then I also believe that they are in a fabulous community in heaven, that there's a lot of fun and tons of love. So then you'll see the other little pillows of clouds with love on it. And that's the other people in their community. And I also wanted to create a little bit of energy, like they can move around, they can go visit each other, they could move around and visit other people. So that's the doodle. Okay, so I'll just ask you to take 1 more minute and start your doodle. And something that's helpful about these doodles is, for instance, I can go back and color more. So what we're looking to create today in just a few minutes is a draft that you can go back to and create. And with all things, this could be your first, but not your last. And I know some of you have kids, and I think we often worry about the impact of a caregiving experience on kids, and doodling could be a way that helps them express what it is that they're experiencing or feeling. So it could be a family event, could be something that you do on your own. It could be part of your journal. I have an intern this semester from University of Illinois. She's a doodler, but she's an exceptional doodler. And she'll actually doodle in her journal. So you could start a doodling journal if you'd like to. Okay, so I'd love to know how you're doing. And curious if anyone was able to actually create a doodle. And what I'll do is I'll create a space in our community called Caring Our Way for you to upload photos of your doodles. So if you've created something and you'd like to share it with us, I'll create a space in Caring Our Way, and then you can upload that. Oh, okay. So what was it like, Kimberly, to actually draw that out? And I'm curious, what did you start with, a letter or a number? Oh, okay. You started with a letter and it felt cathartic. I'll tell you what, I felt like it was cathartic too. I am someone who loves words, but I felt like I didn't have the words. And then just to kind of draw it out really just felt so good. And I only spent, and you'll probably know that I only spent 5 minutes doing that doodle, and it felt so good. And I love to have different colored Sharpies and colored pencils ready to start doodling. So when I feel inspired, I do it. Okay, so you adapted it for the letter N for your mom. Yeah, I love that. I love that. You can create this visualization of how you want her to be, at peace, surrounded by comfort, surrounded by love, surrounded by healing energy. That's something that you can actually represent in the doodle. Okay, so now we're going to go from doodling to a little bit of journaling. So I started writing 6-word stories. I think it was maybe 15 years ago. And I like these simple journal prompts for 6-word stories because you have to get to the bottom line. You have to just say, okay, this is what it is. We're going to write some 6-word stories. And I want to let you know, you are welcome to use hyphens. So you can hyphenate words to make one word. Okay. So let's start with something related to our bottom line priorities. So during your caregiving experience, what was or what is your bottom line priority? And as you think about it, feel free to share your stories in the chat room. Again, you can use hyphens to create one word. So if you think about, oh my gosh, I think about 4 words all together. How do I turn that into a 6-word story? Because I've only got 2 words left. Hyphenate the 4 words. It's 1 word. So here were my bottom line priorities when I was caring for my parents: keeping them safe, remaining patient and pleasant. And that sometimes was a tall order. Okay. And then I also felt one of my priorities was protecting my quality of life. My parents were very, I want to say this in a nice way, but I am a single woman. And so my parents just felt like I had a lot of extra time. And so they thought I should be available because I had all this extra time. So I moved into a situation where I felt like I had to protect my quality of life, really set boundaries about when, how, and why. Oh, Sharon, being present with love and kindness. Oh, I love that. Okay, Jennifer, comfort for my Carrie and me. Yes, I love that. I love that. The other thing that I really felt was a priority during their last couple years of life was being ready when they reached their final declines. The uncertainty about when that would happen was hard, and you know this. It's hard to live with that. And I felt like I needed to be ready. I needed to be ready. Okay. Oh, Kimberly, maintaining self-determination with love, kindness, and positivity. Yeah, I love that. And Kimberly, I'd love for you to share how you define self-determination in the chat room. I think that's such a good word. And I'd love to hear how people think about that and their perspective on self-determination. Okay, so let's write another one. So let's shift into our life after caregiving has ended. So we were very clear about our priorities during caregiving, but now that caregiving has ended, our priority shifts. So what are your new priorities? So here's what I was thinking about as it relates to me. So my health is the priority. My financial wellness matters most. My focus is my business. I treasure family relationships. Okay, so Kimberly is sharing a little bit more about self-determination. So it's about her Carrie's decision on her medical plan. So it's about treatment decisions that are right for your Carrie and allowing your Carrie to make those decisions. So it's about supporting a Carrie with treatment decisions, right? So supporting your Carrie regardless of whether or not you agree with the decision. It does not matter if you agree with the decision. The most important thing is that she has figured out this is the right decision for me right now. What's interesting is we can also use self-determination for ourselves. What's the right decision for us right now? And we can ask others in our life to support us in the decision. Doesn't mean that they have to agree with us, but we'd love their support. Okay, so I'd love to read your 6-word stories about your priority now. Oh, yeah, I think so there's a private message to me about really taking care of our health and finances, which oftentimes during a caregiving experience really became a sacrifice. We can feel like we sacrificed our good health, we sacrificed our financial situation because it felt like there were more pressing priorities. And now, after caregiving ends, we can feel like we're in a race to catch up. I want to catch up with my health. I want to catch up with my financial wellness. Okay. So let's write another one. So let's think about our priorities for the remainder of the year. So this particular retreat is happening at the end of October. So we are moving in to the last 2 months of the year. We are moving into a change of season. We are moving into a change around daylight during the day. We are moving into a time that could take a lot of energy because of holidays. And it also is a time of year where we feel like others might determine what our day looks like. And what others could be is the holiday season. We might feel this pressure to create the best holiday ever. Could be family saying, we've got to keep up with these traditions. Mom is gone, but we want everything to stay the same. And it feels like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. And I am tired. I'm still recovering from caregiving, so I don't have my energy back. So I'm curious, what's your bottom line priority for the remainder of the year? And so here are mine. So I swim 4 days a week. I pursue opportunities with courageous conviction. Oh, that's a good one. I love this courageous conviction. Okay. I enjoy the holiday season. So that might change day to day, week to week. I like the idea that we give ourselves permission to enjoy it the way we want to enjoy it. And we can change our minds at any time. Okay, so we have a couple other 6-word stories in the chat room. So Jennifer is writing, finding meaning and supporting others. Yeah, I like that. And Christine is sharing wellness, strength, develop new relationships, move forward from not being a caregiver, coping with losing my relationships with siblings. Yes. Thank you for talking about that, Christine, because there are losses that we experience during caregiving, and those losses can be loss of relationships. And then there's the physical loss, the actual death. Amelia is writing in the chat room that it's time for her to recover this holiday season. Yeah. I also, Christine, lost a relationship with a sibling, just one sibling. I think it's harder when it's more than one. And it was interesting to see how our perspective on that relationship changed after my mom died. So my mom really wanted to try to establish and keep a relationship with my oldest sibling. She's not well emotionally, so it was very difficult. And it was trying to navigate supporting my mom in this wish that she could have a relationship with her daughter, and then protecting ourselves. So my younger sister and my other brother and I would really be in a position where we were like, well, we got to protect ourselves from her, from our sibling. It was a fine dance. And we loved our mom. And so we wanted her to have closure with that relationship. So we supported it. We also set boundaries around it. And then we were released from that relationship after my mom died. And yeah, okay. And Christine is sharing a little bit more happiness. Yes. And I'd love for you guys to define what happiness means to you. I think that's really interesting because it can mean anything and everything. Sleeping more to regain energy. Yeah. Enjoy Halloween and Christmas. So your mom's favorite holidays were Halloween and Christmas. So we can really think about how do we weave in our Carrie's love for particular holidays to keep them in our holidays. I also think we can think about what are the decorations we want to put up for this holiday season that reflect where we are energy, with our money, and with the memories that we want to bring into the holidays. So giving ourselves permission to think about what that looks like. And Jennifer is writing, creating holiday joy with her son. Oh, Jennifer, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what you consider to be holiday joy. Oh, that's such a good phrase, holiday joy.
In the chat or right here?
Go for it. Yeah.
Well, my son is going to be 5 in January, and he's a precocious little thing, and everything is full of wonder for him right now. And so he's at the age where he really is, everything's new. And so we're taking the sadness that, my parents both died right around Christmas. So we're turning that into really celebrating joy with him and the wonder.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. Holiday joy, that just sounds, it sounds like your son. There's an energy to it that makes you feel good. Yeah, I think it's important that we acknowledge that there's certain events that happened around the holidays that impact how we feel about the holidays. And it's okay to then define what it is for us to be present within the holiday season. Yeah, and so Christine is sharing that decorating was fun and trying to enjoy that again. Okay, and I think we are done with our 6-word stories and doodling. So we're going to move into our panel discussion with Jennifer. And please feel free to keep sharing in the chat room. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. And I'm wondering if anybody feels like they finished a doodle. If you feel like you finished a doodle, share, let me know that in the chat room. Jennifer, did you doodle?
I did not, but I will.
That is okay. It is not a requirement.
Didn't have anything to doodle with.
I forgot to tell the presenters to bring pen and paper. I told everybody else, but I forgot to tell the presenters. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So Jennifer, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell the attendees a little bit about yourself, your experiences, and your work.
Yes. Forgive my cough drop. I'm getting over a cold. I'm Jennifer Richey. I'm a life coach and caregiving consultant and educator. And as far as my losses, I lost my dad in 2015 after an 8-year battle with kidney failure. He finally got a kidney transplant, and then 6 months later passed after, because of a just sort of random 1 in a million thing. So that was pretty sudden. And then, I was jotting down, like, it felt like so much loss during that time. I forgot that, like, we lost my brother-in-law and a close neighbor the following year. I was living with my grandfather for the last 7 years of his life, and we lost him in 2017. He was 97, lived a full life, and most recently took care of my mom for a year in my home. We adapted our home for her, and she died at the end of 2020. And so the entire year of COVID, the first year of COVID, I should say, was spent with her here. And at the same time, I was also raising a 1-year-old foster baby who is now my son, and will be 5 in January. So I worked a job for about 20 years working with people in the disability community. And after my dad died, I really was looking for, I wasn't happy in my job. And it was, every time someone passes, you kind of evaluate where you are in your own life. And I decided I really wasn't happy, and I found coaching. And now, after a period of time, I've been coaching for about 5 years. And now what I really focus on is helping caregivers after caregiving find meaning and what's next, because often it feels very lonely and you feel a little lost and confused about what to do next. And I have some tools for that. So that is me in a nutshell.
I think it's interesting your insight about how you forgot, or It's
right?
not that you forgot. It was that you just didn't put it all together, the timeline of the losses.
Yeah.
And
And
I,
it just felt like so much at the time, but yeah, I mean, it
yeah,
really was a lot in the
yeah.
moment.
So we're going to have a conversation about what the lifespan of grieving looks like. And you are welcome to share in the chat room as we have this conversation. And if anybody wants to unmute and share perspectives, we'd welcome that as well. Because I think that there's a timetable that society and employers, for instance, put on grieving. So we know that a bereavement leave is short. You're lucky if you can get 5 days. And we also know that there's a lot to do after someone dies, and there's a lot to adjust to. So we have this tendency to kind of go by someone else's timetable. And so our conversation today is really around there's a lifespan to grieving. We don't necessarily have to put it into a timetable. So I'd love for you to share in the chat room, how do you define grieving? What is the experience? What is the feeling? What is it like to grieve? Jennifer, how would you define grieving?
Such a great question. I think there's so much goes into it. I think there's a sentimental grief that, when I think about my grandfather, he was 97. We knew he was going to pass. It was when I think about him and that grief that I had in that moment, it was very sentimental and like going through all of his things and his anniversaries of things that would come up. There wasn't that like raw sadness that I had with my dad. And so like when my dad's death was pretty sudden, that just wiped me off my feet. I mean, it really was a traumatic grief. Like I think it's very different depending on if the death is sudden and unexpected versus someone who's lived a full life and everyone knows that this is happening. So
I,
I think it can look
yeah,
different.
I like that grieving as we define it can be defined by the relationship, the experience, the trauma, the expectation.
Yeah. Like
Which
when
is,
I think about the different deaths, it's all very like my mom's grief was pretty traumatic because I was having like physical manifestations of grief of trauma, um because it was such a hard year, and I didn't have that with the other two. It was a different type of grief. So
and I like this reminder that how we grieve for each individual is different for each individual,
mhm.
which helps us then not compare. Why am I so distraught over this death, but not that death? There is no comparison because each relationship is different, each situation, each experience. And it also reminds us that when we experience someone else's grief, we can't compare ours to them. And most important, perhaps, others can't compare their grief to our grief.
Yeah. And sometimes that's hard to do because I have one of my closest friends lost her sister to addiction 2 or 3 years ago, and she is still in such active grief. And I think, gosh, I just wish I could like end that pain for her. But that's going to be how it is for a while. I mean, she was so close.
I
So,
oh, yeah, and I also think the age you are when
mhm,
someone dies can impact your grief.
for sure.
So we have a couple definitions of grief in the chat room. So Linda is sharing the absence of someone who has been an intimate part in your life in some way, missing that relationship and personality to be with and talk with and share with. And Christine is sharing recovery from the actual events and an event of loss, adjusting to emptiness of losing my mom, learning to move on from not being the caregiver for a long time. So that's the other piece of it too. we think about grief again as related to the death, but grief is related to our caregiving experience, meaning that we're no longer doing what we once did. And even if it was stressful and overwhelming and frustrating, it was meaningful and profound and impactful. And that loss of that feeling of, gosh, I'm doing something so meaningful can be a grieving experience as well. And then we ache for a day that has meaningful moments, impactful experiences. Yeah, so I guess if I'm aching, I'm grieving. That would be how I would define it. Okay.
Yeah.
So Amelia is sharing in the chat room, missing him in every moment, right? Yeah. So the hollowness of the moments. Yeah. So we have a nice segue then into, so what's it like to grieve for more than one? And I think this is important to talk about because we do have a tendency to separate our grieving experiences. And you actually had the insight, Jennifer, that you had separated them and then realized how close they were and then the impact on you. And as we get older in our life, I think we build grieving experiences on top of each other. And depending on what happened and where we were in our life and what else was expected of us during our life, we might not have had the time to actually grieve a loss until much later. And we saw that early in the pandemic. My colleague Kathy Murray and I did a grief support group. And because people were at home and not going out and had more time in their day, they came to the grief support group because they realized they had started grieving for something that was a loss 10 years, 14 years prior. But it was the time in their life that they had to grieve because we are so busy that we don't necessarily take time to grieve. So for most of us, I would say we're all in a perspective of grieving for more than one. Yeah, Linda is sharing in the chat room that she has a friend who lost 5 family members, 4 to suicide, and 1 to old age in a short space of time. And I think that is, how do you wrap your heart around that? Yeah. So I think the grieving for more than one is such an overwhelming experience. When my brother died, it was unexpected. My sister-in-law called me and said, my brother's name is Tim. Tim just died. I was like, so I had to reach out to my other brother, Keith, and my younger sister, Julie. And then I had to go to my parents' apartment and tell them that Tim had died. And when Tim died, my mom was, I think, 86, and my dad was 89. So I went into their apartment, shared the news, waited for Keith and Julie to come. And then at one point in the day, Keith and Julie and I were together. And at this time, we were very estranged from our older sister. So we knew we had to reach out and tell her, but we didn't consider her to be a sister, so to speak. And the 3 of us stood in a little corner in my parents' apartment, and we looked at each other and said, how did this happen? It's just us. It's just us. The impact of losing a brother and a sister was so significant in that moment. We're just like, how did this happen? How did this happen? So I think this grieving for more than one puts us in this place where we just can't even comprehend, how did this happen? How did this happen? Kathy, who runs grief support groups with me, is also a grief movement specialist. And she has done other presentations for us where she helps us go through grief movements. And one of the movements that we go through with her is called Why, where you just open up your hands and you say, why? You look to the sky and you say, why? 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 It's powerful because I think we're left with questions and search for answers. And when we get caught up in the search for answers, why would someone have this experience of losing 5 family members? Oh my gosh, such a short time. Why? Why is there pain and suffering in the world? Why is there war in the world? When we get really caught up in that search for the answers, we can let go with why, why, why. I found that to be really powerful as an expression of, oh, why, why?
Denise, you talked about having lost your brother and sister, and I think there's something similar when you lose both parents. I remember when my mom lost her dad, my grandfather, and I remember her saying, because we had lost my grandma years ago, I feel like an orphan now. And I was like, Mom, you're 65. You're not an orphan, you know? I absolutely understood when my mom died. I was like, who? And I'm an only child. There's no one left. Like, it's me, you know? And that was really, really sort of, I wished that I could share with her that I understood then, you know, what that meant. And there is something, especially if you have a close relationship with your parents, losing both of them is just different.
When my dad was dying in his apartment, Keith, Julie, my niece were there with me. And I remember looking around. Now I am 60. I remember looking around and saying, am I old enough to be doing this? I didn't have that thought with my mom because my dad was still there and I was trying to navigate dad's presence and all that. He was a huge presence. And so the idea that we were there helping our last parent die really was, oh my gosh, am I old enough to be in this position where we're taking on all this responsibility? We're not deferring to another parent. We're not respectful of another parent's wishes. We are calling the shots. Am I old enough to be doing this?
Huh. Kimberly brought up, you know, having an only child and the stress of that. And, you know, my mom was always worried about that too. She didn't want it to be a burden. She didn't want me to be alone. And I think, you know, having someone, if they don't have someone in their lives, having someone like a CCC to jump in and just be kind of a partner walking through with you is a great use of that. But it is a different experience as an only child. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, Christine, go for it.
Okay, first of all, I've never been so emotional in a webinar in my life. So this has been not totally unexpected, but you are hitting like so many things. But anyway, I wanted to touch on like you said, the length of grieving. And sorry if this is really amazing.
Oh, good.
So my mother passed away 10 years ago, actually, this August 9th. And I'm sorry, this has just brought out a lot of emotions currently. But anyway, sorry. So
Don't
I
apologize.
was her caregiver. I lived with her for many years, and being a nurse in the family, it was kind of something that from my siblings and even my mother, who was a nurse too, like expected. But I don't regret it. I mean, that's something that I took on myself. But I totally agree with, it's hard to move on. I just turned 60. I turned 50 when my mother had her year of health deterioration at 83. I lost my father at 59 from cancer. So she became both I felt my father and mother. I was like 23, 24 when my father passed away. So we became very close. But I've been trying to move on. And then relating to the woman who said about her friend, I met someone about 3 years ago, but 2 years ago, his mother got sick during COVID, and our relationship kind of changed because I almost like took on that like caregiver role again, and but also to help him get through it. And he, strangely enough, from what the other guest said, he has a father that committed suicide, a brother that had committed suicide, and now his mother, who out of nowhere, got COVID, and then she passed away with COVID. And so he looked at me, being a nurse, as trying to help him through it. But it really brought up a lot of my past experience, and the grieving process kind of elevated again in my life. So it's been like a little bit of a roller coaster, and things somehow I thought things that I had moved on from kind of came back.
Yeah.
So I'm just, like I said, I'm not really, this is kind of I don't really show my emotion like this. So, like I said, this is really an amazing webinar.
I think that we just power through. And we believe that it's important to power through, to be strong for others. So after your dad died, you probably felt, I want to be strong for my mom. I want to be present to her. And in many ways, you started taking care of your mom after your dad died.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a long time to take care of someone else. And then after your mom died, I would imagine it was a grieving experience for both parents. And that's significant. It's significant.
And like I said, I don't mean to take up the time here, but I know. And so like the loss of my siblings, like it was already, my relationship with my brother and sister, I'm the youngest, kind of was already deteriorated before my mom got sick. It kind of deteriorated over the years, but they weren't there to help. Um, and that's fine. I almost kind of think it in the in the back, thinking back, it was better that way. But I never felt that they understood my loss, or how much of a loss it was for me.
Yeah.
Being the I guess being the caregiver, doing everything I did, how it affected me. And sadly, I think they really only wanted what they got out of my mother passing away from, the material things that they received. Um, and I actually made the choice myself to just, I had to take them away from my life because they were so negative to me. And I realized it when I had friends or strangers that became friends, or just people that entered my life and created blessings or support and left or stayed. And I didn't have that for my siblings. So it's hard.
It is hard. You also talked about a couple things related to milestones. So you had significant milestones related to age. So 50, 60. And I think sometimes these milestones of how has it been 10 years since I last saw my mom? That really can hit you. So when we think about this timeline of grieving, I often think that we are in shock for a while. Everybody understands that death happens. It's just very different when you are there at death and you realize, oh my gosh, that's it. There's no more. That's it. Other experiences in life, we can feel like, well, there might be a little more left, but there's nothing left at the death. That's it.
Well, and it's interesting, like you said about, so like I turned 50 and in March of 2013, and my mother started getting sick at the end of March. And I remember later in the year before my mom ended up having a massive stroke and went in hospice for like a week and then passed away. But I had friends that would like later on that maybe didn't really know what I was going through were like, so you turned 50. What did that feel like? And I was like, I don't even know. Like, I didn't even think about that because I was going through so much. And is it really important, the number? You know what I mean? So it was like a weird thing that someone asked me, and I'm like, I have no idea what it means to turn 50 because I was dealing with so many other things in my life, and like you said, and now it's 10 years later, and I still feel like I'm dealing with,
Yeah.
The grief.
Yeah. I also think that unless you are involved in caregiving, you can't understand the connection you create with someone who's vulnerable and really looks to you to take care of them. There's something that is a special treasure about that. And I think part of our grief is that connection through vulnerability is quite powerful. And I think in many ways, it tugs at our heart to think about caring for someone when they were vulnerable and how much that took from us. So we are strong for another who's vulnerable for years. And people outside of our circle of vulnerability, look at us and think, how strong is she? And then you're a healthcare professional, so they say, well, she's a nurse, so she gets right. But I think for all of us, it's very difficult to explain that vulnerable connection and how much energy it takes for us to be strong to another when they're vulnerable. And it's not one day of vulnerability, it's years of vulnerability.
That's so true. And I at the time, so my clinical background was an OR nurse, and I'm actually from Chicago. I relocated to New Mexico. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, about 3 years after my mom passed away. But you're right. I was doing something different at the time, and my mother was an OR nurse. That's probably kind of how I got into it. My father was a general practitioner. But you're right. I felt like I couldn't show my vulnerability or my weakness or my emotions when I was with my mom. And then, like I said, I lived with her for many years. And so I would literally have to walk away and like go into like another room or bathroom and like lose it. And then like come back and be like, okay, what's next? You want lunch? Okay. I mean, and I talked to a friend of mine who was also a nurse, and I said to her, I never did this kind of patient care in my clinical background, and I said, wow, like, and this is early on, like I had this moment of like, how am I going to do this? But you're right. I mean, you take on this role of, like you said, it's part of being my mom's daughter. My mom's, I was her strength when she had major illnesses, and because I knew different doctors or who to go to or who to ask to go to, like she looked at me as that role model, and also I was her daughter, and we were very close friends. Like we did everything together, and so it takes on such a strong piece of you that when it's gone, like you feel like you lost a lot of yourself and your strength, even though people think, wow, it's your time now. You did all this for your mom, but you don't realize what a toll it takes.
Yeah. Christine, we're going to close for our break. And I want to
Okay,
thank you.
sorry that I took all that time.
No, I am grateful that you're here with us. And I think, and Jennifer will echo this with me, we are very accustomed to tears and we welcome them and we take care of you as you cry. So feel free to let it out, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're here, is to create a space where you can just feel it. Okay. So we're going to take our 10-minute break and then we're going to come back, and then Danielle is going to help us with our finances. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Go ahead and you can turn your video off, whatever you need, and then come back in 10 minutes. And Christine, thanks so much. Thanks for sharing.